Good morning and welcome everyone to 5 Common Exit Interview Mistakes here by the Work Institute. My name is Mark McWatters. I am the Director of Client Solutions here at the Work Institute and excited to walk you all through this conversation here this morning and eager to share what we have found as the 5 most common exit interview mistakes that are taking place in the market currently. It looks like we have a couple people that are still popping through here, so I'm going to hold tight here for another minute. I've got 10 o'clock right now, so here at 10:01 we will go ahead and get started, 10 o'clock being Central Time. For some of you, I know that may be different. So hold tight just a second before we get in here to our 5 common exit interview mistakes. For those of you that are just joining in, we're holding for just one more minute as we see some other attendees that are coming through live. For those of you that are currently on the phone and here on the web, you should see a red chair in your background saying 5 Common Exit Interview Mistakes by the Work Institute. All right, great. Well, it looks like we have got our other attendees here, and we are ready to get started. So again, good morning to everyone. My name is Mark McWatters. I am the Director of Client Solutions here at the Work Institute. I'm excited to walk you through the 5 common exit interview mistakes that we have seen in the marketplace. I think a lot of this will resonate with some of you. As we all know, exit interviews tend to be a hot topic. And a hotly debated topic because many people are dissatisfied. So excited to talk through what we see as the common mistakes that are taking place and to give you a couple things to consider as to how you can do these more effectively. Again, just to point out, there is a chat feature here in our webinar. So if you have any questions, there is the option to chat a question. So I will be monitoring that to ensure any questions that you all have are covered. But let's go ahead and get started and walk through our presentation here this morning. So our agenda, first we're going to talk about exit interview ailments. So what are some of the common things that are taking place and why people are frustrated with their exit interviews? Then I'll introduce a little bit of who the Work Institute is, give you some background for those that haven't worked with us before. Hey, where are these mistakes coming from? What data is leading us to believe these mistakes take place and how we can improve them? Then we will look through those 5 common exit interview mistakes. We will also talk about what right looks like. And there at the end, we're going to talk through the most important thing in this process, which is taking action on these exit interviews. So as we start here with our exit interview ailments, and really what I would like you all to think about is, why are you here? What has brought you into our webinar this morning? And my guess is some of these you are experiencing. Is it low response rates? Is it that your organization is big and people are really completing exit interviews, well, as much as they can and with people who we really don't want them to leave, so there's really no consistency? Perhaps you're wondering, are these people even being honest? Is an exit interview conversation the type of conversation that will bring true, actionable, honest feedback? Or perhaps you're having these interviews, but they're just collecting dust. You have them in a file somewhere, or you have them online and the reporting isn't very accessible. Or maybe it's just that the data isn't actionable and that you're getting very high-level responses. You're getting things like, I'm leaving for personal reasons, or I'm leaving for a better opportunity. How helpful is that to you all in order to be able to improve the process? Not very helpful. Or maybe it's just that you don't have the time currently and that it's so manual that you're curious if there is a better way to do these exit interviews and what kind of mistakes are being made out there in the marketplace currently. So these are some of the ailments that we are hoping to talk more about this morning, but also offer a cure of how this can be done better. So as we introduce here, before we get into these mistakes, I think it's helpful for you all to know who the Work Institute is. Where is this coming from? Why should I pay attention when these people are sharing information? So to give you some brief background, we are a full-service research firm. We're located here in Nashville, Tennessee. And what we're going to talk about here this morning is based on data that we found conducting over 40,000 exit interviews last year. This year will be well north of 50,000 exit interviews. And so we have a lot of data that is leading our process. We use our evidence-based research to lead some different data points and to help us clarify exactly how exit interviews should be done, but also to point out where some common mistakes that are currently taking place in the market. For some more context, the Work Institute also helps with analysis, action planning, and support for many of our partners. As you see there at the bottom, we've been trusted by over 400 organizations, and including many Fortune 500 companies, many big organizations that many of you may have heard of, or perhaps some of you currently work for. So let's go ahead and dive into our 5 common mistakes. Mistake number 1, the questions. We get this call very often of we don't know what questions we should be asking. And as you see here, we have the red light of what should we stop doing, and the green light of what data is showing us is the optimal way. So here with regards to questions, what we see happening most often is that people are asking too many questions, and they're being very leading with these questions. These are coming from a gut instinct that you, the leader of the people business, or just what you think may be taking place. And with these questions, you're asking many closed-ended questions. Did you feel you were paid enough? Did you like working for your supervisor? When you're asking a yes, no, or a true, false type question, you're not asking your former employee or your current employee as they're leaving to elaborate further. They're also not very interactive. People are taking high-level responses and checking them off the list. And then we also see that there's not much consistency in the process. The way you interview Jim and the way you interview Bev may be very different. While there is value to that flexibility in allowing your employee to tell us what's important to you specifically, you need these common themes and you need that consistency in order to evaluate the interviews together. Now, the best way to do this and the best way to have questions that are going to work is think about 7 to 11 mixed method questions. And I will show you what mixed method means here in our next visual. But 7 to 11 mixed method questions is going to lead to a 12 to 15 minute interview. That is the optimal time for an exit interview. And where that comes from is feedback fatigue is a very real thing. After that 15-minute point, our data has shown us that the actionability of that feedback is going to drop off, as well as response rates. Think for yourself. We've all been there before. You're taking a survey, you're taking an interview, and really you're just trying to pencil whip it, for lack of a better term, to get it over with. Well, we don't want that to happen in your exit interview process. So in order to ensure you're getting the actionability, to ensure that you're asking the right questions, we want to build this around a 12 to 15-minute process. Now you see here on your screen also it's important to have behavioral interview questions. So asking for these details, probing for that specificity, ensuring that actionable data, something that you can take and act on, is within the feedback. Now, what does that question structure look like? Here's an example for you when we talk about the mixed method. On a scale of excellent, very good, good, fair, poor, how would you rate company X as an employer? So we're starting with a rating question, and as you see here on your screen, we're following up with why. What that does is it gives you the rating for trending information on the back end, so you can see different trending reports of, in this case, how your company was rated as an employer. but also by asking why we're getting to the actionability of that response. If your company is rated as excellent, you as the people leader of the business might pat yourself on the back and think, wow, we've been rated as excellent. But what's critical for you to know is why you were rated as excellent, because that's what you're going to be able to take and incorporate into your culture to continue to improve, becoming that preferred employer. Now, once that why is asked, it's important that there is probing for specificity. Here at the Work Institute, we probe for specificity for up to 4 responses. Now again, if we're given 10, we take down 10, but a general guide for our behavioral interviewer is they are probing for up to 4 responses. Another critical element to this is once you've received these multiple responses, following up and asking, okay, well, which was the most important out of X, Y, and Z that you gave us? An interesting statistic for you is that roughly 30% of the time, the second, third, or fourth reason given as to why they rated something the way they did is noted as most important. So really want to drive home how critical it is that the questions that are being asked are in this mixed method approach. You need the trending, but you really need the open-ended probing that's taking place and that follow-up of which was the most important. One more element you'll see here on your screen is that if someone were to rate it as very good or good, say 1 or 2 levels below that top rating, it's critical to ask what would it take to earn an excellent rating. You're going to get 1 or 2 things typically that are great low-hanging fruit that you all can act on as an organization. So those areas of opportunity that are going to come from the difference between a very good and good rating and an excellent rating is great data for you to have on hand. The second most common mistake that we see in exit interviews is timing. What most people are doing is they are having this conversation in the last day of employment, or perhaps it's the last week, or really just let's get to them before they leave to have this conversation. Well, data shows us that 41% of your reasons for leaving are going to change between the last day of employment and at least 2 weeks after departure. So Mark, where does that come from? Why would that happen? Why would 41% of the reasons for leaving change? Well, there are 3 key things that are happening in this 2+ week time period. The first is that former employee has gotten their last paycheck. The second is that they are no longer under that previous supervisor. Now, regardless of which organization you work for, supervisor is going to be a huge driver in retention. Think about your own boss. And then in most situations in that 2-week time period, they have started their new job. When those 3 things are taking place, it's allowing for the conversation that's happening 2+ weeks after departure to be more about the entire employee experience as opposed to the emotions of the last day. I want you to also think back to perhaps that last job that you left. Whether you loved or hated that company, it's an emotional process. And so when the exit interview is taking place before you leave, the interview might be more about the emotions that you're experiencing as opposed to the entire employee experience, which you, as an HR leader, that's what you need to know. You need to be able to evaluate the entire employee experience. So let's take a look at this visual too in terms of this 2+ weeks. Now, the way this is working is you have the termination or the resignation that's happening. Ideally, you're having an offboarding meeting where you're collecting a badge or a cell phone or a laptop. In this offboarding meeting, you're communicating that an exit interview will be taking place. If you're partnering with the Work Institute, we actually provide communication for you that you're able to share with your former employee or your exiting employee to tell them that, hey, your feedback is so important that we've hired a third party to contact you in 2+ weeks to have a conversation with you about your employee experience. And we greatly value your feedback and thank you for participating. Then they're having their last day. Those 2+ weeks are going by, and this exit interview is taking place. Now, when we talked about questions earlier, one question that we encourage you to include would be a re-recruitment type question. So are you currently employed? If so, where? And are you interested in returning to the organization? Partners of the Work Institute receive notifications telling them that, hi, Susie Smith is interested in returning to your organization. Susie is interested in returning under these circumstances. What this does is allows you to re-recruit those former employees where perhaps the grass wasn't really greener on the other side and they're interested in returning. So common mistake number 3, who is conducting the interview? A critical aspect to exit interviews and a best practice is certainly using an unbiased third party. Most people adopt this concept and know that especially in an exit interview, in this very delicate conversation about why someone is leaving your organization, an unbiased third party is going to collect more open and honest feedback. What tends to happen with many employers is that in this internal exit interview, it becomes whoever's available to conduct the interview. Perhaps it's the supervisor, perhaps it's an HR business partner. Well, when this is taking place, what we see as a major common theme in internal exit interviews is you aren't getting the actionable data you need, especially around the supervisor relationship, which is potentially the most delicate part of that conversation. Again, regardless of what type of organization you work for or who you work for, the supervisor relationship is a huge driver in engagement and retention. And when this exit interview is being done internally, it's very difficult to get that honest feedback about the supervisor. One thing we encourage our partners to do is that if they're submitting their internal reason code, well, please send that to us when you're including the employee contact and demographic information, and we'll actually show you the comparison between what they're telling you and what they're telling us. And supervisor is a huge difference that we see in the feedback. So the best practice is to have this unbiased third party and also to have someone who's a skilled behavioral interviewer in this conversation. That open-ended conversation where the natural curiosity of an interviewer and probing deeper, digging deeper for that actionability gives you a response that you can do something with. So another statistic that you see here at the bottom, very similar to what you actually saw regarding timing, but that 40% of your reasons for leaving will change between an internal and an external exit interview. So just to recover those two stats, 41% will change between the last day of employment and at least 2 weeks afterwards, and 40% of those reasons for leaving will also change between an internal exit interview and an external conversation. As we hop in here to common mistake number 4, the reporting. So we get this call very often of, Mark, we're doing our exit interviews currently, they're collecting dust on a shelf, or we have someone that is conducting them as often as they can, but getting them inputted into the system is very manual and it's simply taking too long. What we see taking place is that when we're relying on HR's instinct to lead this reporting process of, hey, here's what we think we're seeing, what that becomes is it's more of what you recently heard. So I did these 2 exit interviews this week. Both of those people left because of compensation issues. Well, all of a sudden, people are having a knee-jerk reaction to compensation, when really what we need is aggregated data of all of these interviews together in order to truly see that trend that's taking place from reporting. A best practice regarding reporting is to have this real-time access. So here at the Work Institute, as exit interviews complete, they are being loaded into a reporting system which our partners have access to go in and see what is happening with my reasons for leaving. Or if I were to look at facility X under supervisor Y, why are people leaving that part of the organization? So having both high-level and detailed reports will allow you to see your organization aggregated together, of course for trending, which can be very helpful, but also detailed reports where you can slice and dice into these local levels and see what's specifically happening at Department X under Supervisor Y, and to take it one step further, maybe even into my high potentials in Department X under Supervisor Y. Now, another best practice to come out of reporting is having these automated into your inbox. So as a partner of the Work Institute, you would have these reports dropping into your inbox at whatever frequency you would like. Or perhaps it's your supervisor, and maybe your supervisor needs a report on the second Tuesday of every month for her top 5 reasons for leaving. Well, rather than having to log into the system and go to that report, it can simply be dropped into your inbox, making it one step easier, saving you that much more time, to where you can focus on making strategic business decisions associated with your people, not manually pulling reports. And the most important part of this is it becomes more proactive. You're seeing trends in the data, you're making adjustments, which we're about to get to that 5th common mistake of taking action in just a second. But by being more proactive in this process, that's where you're really driving change and where you're getting ahead of the game in terms of what might take place here in the future. So as far as reporting goes, I just wanted to give you an idea of what this might look like. Through the Work Institute, we call our reporting system Navigator. And in Navigator, you see visuals like you see here on your screen. It's unlimited in nature. You're able to pull as many reports as you like. You're able to build your own reports. You're also able to export all of this information to Excel, PDF, PowerPoint, or Word, so you're actually able to take those reports into meetings, include them in presentations, and so forth. Now you can have as many users as you like, and you can also segment that access. So let's say that Rachel only needs access to a certain department or a certain region within her organization. Well, we can have that set up to where when you log in, all you're looking at is that specific group. So again, just to give you an idea, this is what Navigator would look like. You have high-level reports, you have drill-down reports, some trending information, all making it that much easier for you to ultimately take action on the data. Which leads us to common mistake number 5. And this is the most important part. I can't stress this enough. Most organizations are not taking action on their exit interview data. And really that goes even one step further of many other types of workforce research. Perhaps that's your engagement study, or that's your onboarding analysis, or it's your stay interviews. But taking action on the data is an absolutely mission critical part. Again, if your exit interviews are collecting dust somewhere, then they are serving no purpose. And even if the best data possible is collected from those exit interviews, if you're not acting on the data, then it's not providing the value that you're looking for. So some of the mistakes that we see are perhaps these exit interviews are only completed for compliance. Now, while compliance is an important part of that conversation of are you aware of any unethical, illegal, or fraudulent behavior that took place while you were employed at Company X? If that's the only reason you're doing them, then they tend to not be acted upon. And so you can't be conducting your exit interview strictly for compliance purposes. Now, the other thing we see is that it's fire drills when taking action. Oh, Susie Smith left and she said X, Y, and Z. Let's start a fire drill and run and fix this problem. Well, that's not consistently taking action. That's just reacting to the latest thing that's taken place. The other issue we see here, you're probably asking yourself, Mark, what is boiling the ocean? Well, that's when you're trying to drive change at an organization level all the time. And that's how you're trying to lead your organization, by making a decision at 30,000 feet when the issues at 5,000 feet are very different between Department X and Department Y. So in order to really drive change and to get these quick, sustainable results, you have to have ongoing action planning. And you need to focus on the local levels in addition to seeing things from that high perspective. You also need to focus on what's the low-hanging fruit. With many of our clients, there are going to be some very quick things that we can adjust. So by changing that low-hanging fruit, you're changing the perspective of your employee to know that this data will be acted upon. And when the data is acted upon, that's when you start to see higher response rates, more actionability in your feedback, and that goes throughout all of your different workforce research. So again, the most critical part of this process and the mistake that is costing people the most is that they're not taking action on the data. So ask yourself, do I have some workforce research outstanding? Do I have exit interviews? Or that engagement study that we did 2 months ago, have we really done anything with it? Because it all gets back to what we call expectancy theory. And with that expectancy theory, if you're not acting on the data, then your employees aren't going to continue to provide you feedback. So as we think about taking action, here's a quick visual for you and how the Work Institute approaches taking action. Now, you're going to uncover some great feedback in exit interviews too about, Joe in Department X is really doing great things. He's very respectful to his employees. He motivates them well. They all feel like they're held accountable. Well, we need to celebrate Joe's success, right? So patting Joe on the back. But also there's going to be some areas of opportunity. And let's face it, we're trying to uncover those areas of opportunity so we can take action and drive results. So getting back to that low-hanging fruit, what can we change immediately? What needs further investigation? Perhaps what we're getting from this feedback is leading us towards what may be a monumental change in the way we do business. So perhaps we have to continue to collect more feedback to really validate that this change needs to happen. Now what's also important is making those commitments and following through based on the feedback. You're tracking the progress, you're measuring the results, and ultimately communicating the success back. In the exit interview space, you're communicating the success back to those stakeholders of we have reduced turnover by X%. Here's what we have learned are the top 3 reasons for people leaving our organization. Or here is the key pain point in our organization, and here's what we've done about it. By communicating that success, by closing that feedback loop, you're going to continue to drive results and see that reduction in turnover or those higher response rates, those more actionable responses in your exit interview process. As we continue marching on here, let's talk about, okay, Mark, well, we've talked through these mistakes. We've talked through some of these things we can do to improve the process. Well, let's recap what some of those look like. So what does right look like in exit interviews? As a reminder, it's 7 to 11 questions, these open-ended mixed method questions combining that rating and the why behind the rating. Now we have this probing for specificity that's taking place. Here at the Work Institute, we call it double probing, where they're digging for those actionable details. They're not taking the I left for personal reasons. They're saying, okay, well, what does personal mean to you, and why else did you leave the organization, as an example. That conversation is typically 12 to 15 minutes. It's taking place at least 2 weeks after someone has left the organization. Now, a common question that we have is, okay, what type of method should we be using to conduct this interview? Well, we have both a telephonic and a web-enabled approach. The best way to do an exit interview is certainly with the telephonic model. It's going to drive the highest response rates. It's also going to drive the most actionability within your feedback. Now, the Work Institute's response rate last year on 2014 on these 40,000 exit interviews was 63%. So what we do in many situations is that we may have a phone model, and in some cases we'll supplement that with emails. Perhaps you're thinking, well, at my organization, I think that we would have a strong response rate with our electronic version. Great. Then let's use both methods. Let's give your employee the option to take it online, but also have these 6 calls that are taking place. Here at TWI, we are calling every 3 to 5 days. We're leaving voicemails, giving callback numbers, allowing your former employee to schedule interviews with us, and that's what helps to drive this strong response rate of 63%. Now also remember that regular action planning with your data has to be taking place. So how are we using the data? How are we driving change and ultimately seeing the results from our feedback? And then lastly, as we talked about earlier, and most people adopt this philosophy, that the external third party, especially in an exit interview conversation, is going to help you get more open, honest, actionable feedback in the conversation. Now, to summarize these things, it's just critical that we have proper research principles used in the process. We see a lot of organizations out there that are conducting their exit interviews off these gut instincts or just what I've heard lately. But remember, there are certain research principles that are going to be transferable to your organization. These, how many questions should we be asking? How long should the interview be? When should we talk to these people? How should we talk to these people? What types of questions? And should we call or email them? These research principles are things that we use all day, every day in order to drive this high response rate and this actionable feedback to our research partners. Now, as we continue marching on, we come here to the end of our brief exit interview 5 common mistakes presentation. I hope that you're able to walk away with some quick hit facts that you can incorporate into your process, or perhaps you're interested in exploring more of what does this solution look like with the Work Institute. What would that investment be? What is the timeline for this kind of research? What does the support look like on the back end from a research perspective of really driving this actionable change? Well, I've pulled up my contact information here on the screen for you. You'll see my email address and my call numbers here. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. We actually have a few minutes here left over in our webinar here this morning. So are there any questions out there currently that we could answer for those on the call? Remember, there's a chat feature where you're able to come in and pull up where you can type in questions that I can answer for you. So let's pause here for just a second. I don't see any questions yet, but would invite those to come through. All right, well, I will take that as you all got a lot of great data today, a lot of things to think about, some ways that you can improve the exit interview process. Again, I also invite you to contact me individually if you have more questions or if you're interested in exploring more of what this may look like for your specific organization. Thanks again for your time this morning. We look forward to seeing you in our next webinar, and I look forward to hearing from those who may have additional questions.